My March on the Rails video is running a little bit behind schedule. You know how it is. Leaves on the line. One of BookTube's many reading events in March was a new one called March on the Rails, which is dedicated to books with trains in them, which is what inspired me to reread Strangers on a Train by Patricia Highsmith. This is a dark and twisted psychological crime thriller. It follows two men, two strangers, who meet on a train. And the two men, one of them is an up-and-coming architect called Guy Haynes, and the other is a rather disaffected drunkard from a wealthy family called Charles Anthony Bruno. It becomes apparent as the two men are talking that Bruno is kind of fascinated, maybe even obsessed, with the idea of murder. He outlines his plan for what he thinks would be a perfect murder, or rather a perfect pair of murders. His idea is that two relative strangers could swap murders. If they each want someone out of the way, they could swap murders, and that would give each of them the perfect alibi for the murder that they wanted done, and absolutely no connection or motive to the murder they actually did. Of course, Guy is repulsed and appalled by this idea, and he protests that he's not the type to commit murder. But Bruno insists there is no type. Anyone can commit murder, and it's just down to motivation and circumstances. Bruno takes quite a liking to Guy, and he decides to do Guy a favour by doing the murder that he has figured out Guy would benefit from. That is, the death of Guy's unfaithful and estranged wife, Miriam. So Bruno tracks Miriam down and murders her, and that sets into motion a series of events which lead inexorably to Guy fulfilling his half of the bargain. Strangers on a Train was first published in 1950, and it was Patricia Highsmith's debut novel. I'm actually kind of amazed that it's a debut, because it's an incredibly controlled and assured piece of work. It's a really deep psychological study of the darkest recesses of the human psyche. Patricia Highsmith was, I think she had a very dark, bleak, pessimistic view of human nature, and that very much comes through in this book, and I think most of her books, really. It's quite disquieting. It's quite disturbing, but it's incredibly compelling reading. I think that both Guy and Bruno are really vividly well-drawn characters. We get a really deep insight into all of their thought processes as they get deeper and deeper into this dark, twisted, obsessive state. It's a really compelling, quite disturbing read. There's also a strong homoerotic subtext. Guy and Bruno are drawn together. They share this deep, profound connection, and it's one that would be incredibly dangerous to tell anyone else. So they're kind of stuck together closer than anyone else in their lives in a way that they can't share. And, you know, for queer people in the 1950s, that was obviously a very common feeling. Sadly, it's still a common feeling for a lot of people, but I think back then even more so. And yeah, that shines through very strongly in this book, and I think a lot of other Highsmith books as well. The story was, of course, famously adapted by Alfred Hitchcock for a film that came out the year after the book did, and I was familiar with the film long before I read the book. So when I first read the book about 12 years ago, I was kind of underwhelmed by it. I think the Hitchcock film, well, it diverges wildly from Highsmith's plot. Basically, after the murder of Miriam, it just goes off in a completely different direction. And the Hitchcock film has, I think, a more kind of, it's a more fast-paced, thrilling, fun story that builds to a big explosive climax. In fact, the climactic scene on the out of control merry-go-round was taken from an entirely different book, The Moving Toy Shop by Edmund Crispin. So if you want to read the source material for the Hitchcock film, you actually have to read two books. But yeah, I think when I first read Highsmith's Strangers on a Train, I was kind of underwhelmed because the Hitchcock film was fresh in my mind. But this time round, I was better able to appreciate it for what it is rather than what it's not. And what it is brilliant. I really love the experience of revisiting a book that I wasn't crazy about before and finding myself in love with it. And yeah, I really, really loved this book. It's one of my reads of the year so far, definitely. So yeah, I'm really glad that I revisited it and really glad that March on the Rails inspired me to do so. In fact, I don't think I've read any Highsmith for the last 10 years, and I'm not really sure why, because when I first started reading her, apart from Strangers on a Train, I really loved what books I did read of hers, and I was really excited to read more, and then I just kind of drifted away. So yeah, I think this might be a helpful reminder that I really like Patricia Highsmith, and I definitely need to read more of her stuff, because yeah, I think I've read about 6 of her books so far, and now that I've grown to love Strangers on a Train too, yeah, there's not a dud of any of them that I've read, so yeah, I'm going to have to get on that. In fact, the only downside of reading this book was that I had a great idea for a video, but too late to actually do it. So I'm going to just share my idea here, and if anyone else on BookTube wants to do it, then you have my blessing, and please tag me in it because I'd love to see it. The idea is this: Strangers on a Train would make a brilliant book to buddy read, and then you could each review the book on each other's channels. Crisscross. So, those are my thoughts on Strangers on a Train. I'd love to hear in the comments if you're a fan of Patricia Highsmith and if there's any other books of hers that you would especially recommend. I am familiar with probably her most famous book, The Talented Mr. Ripley, but I haven't read the rest of the Ripleyad, so yeah, maybe I'll do that. But yeah, any others that you would recommend, I'd also love to hear about. Anyway, that's about it from me today. I hope you're having a lovely day, and I will see you when I see you.